My name is Natasha. I'm a medical herbalist and I have over 10 years experience helping people with period problems and hormone issues, infertility, all the way through to menopause. And today we're going to be talking about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And we'll be recording and I'll go through the content, and if you have any questions, you feel free to interrupt me using the chat button at the bottom, and if I don't spot it, I'll get to it at the end. Anywho, so I think I shall begin, but I'm kind of curious, actually, if you could tell me in the chat who here who has been diagnosed with PCOS. I know that there are some people training to be herbalists or practitioners in the group as well. But yeah, if you could let me know if you have PCOS, that'd be good. Just get an idea. And if you're here because you're a therapist that want just for more information, that's good to know too. Oh, that's interesting. See Mac, would you mind telling me what makes you were diagnosed with PCOS, presumably, and what makes you think that you don't actually have it? I'm going to go through like how you're diagnosed with PCOS. I hope I am. If my notes are any good today. Oh, here we go. There's Yasmin. I knew there was somebody waiting. Oh, okay. You had scans which showed cysts, but your bloods were normal. All right, we can work with that. I'll explain. Potentially, you'll have a aha moment with any luck. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so PCOS is one of my favorite subjects because there is so much confusion around this topic. We'll try to remove and replace my glasses as needed. Such a confused topic about whether it is it's generally seen as a reproductive health issue, but is it really a reproductive health issue? And just because it only affects women doesn't mean that it actually is being caused by the reproductive system in the first place. We'll see. I would also add that, like, when people go to their doctors and get a diagnosis of PCOS, they're often told there's nothing that they can do, and that they're offered the contraceptive pill as though it's a treatment because it helps to regulate their periods, but it's not a treatment. It just gives the impression that your periods are coming more regularly. So perhaps 30% or more women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome actually have polycystic ovaries. So calling it polycystic ovarian syndrome makes you feel like you should definitely have polycystic ovaries, but only like potentially as low as a third of people with PCOS actually have polycystic ovaries. Having said that, we think that if more people were being scanned, more healthy people were being scanned for their ovary, how many like cysts they're making each time they ovulate, that it might actually be very normal to be producing more than one egg at any time. And so these form lots of cysts. It's polycystic, many cysts. So there is one writer, Ruth Trickey, who believes that actually having polycystic ovaries might be a completely normal and healthy thing. And it's just that we misinterpret it for illness because we're so not used to looking at healthy women's ovaries. This one. theory. It would be much better if we renamed PCOS hyperandrogenic persistent ovulatory dysfunction syndrome. So with any kind of syndrome, it's important to realize that we're using that term because we're looking at a collection of symptoms without a known cause. Like, we're not quite sure what causes it in its origination, but we understand that it comes with a certain number of symptoms and, I think you could say, pathologies. So we know that in PCOS or HA pods or HAPODs, I'm not sure how we would say it if we were calling it this, there is too much androgen, so that will show up in your bloods, and you will persistently have issues with ovulation, and that will show up as irregular cycles for you. And it's the first half of your cycle that will change in length, usually when you are when you have PCOS. So you might have 3-4 more weeks before you ovulate, if you're ovulating at all. Some people stop having periods altogether with PCOS because they're not ovulating. But then the time that you have from ovulation to menstruating is usually 2 weeks. As long as you've ovulated, it's usually around 2 weeks. So if you are using the fertility awareness method to keep track of figuring out if you are ovulating or not, it might be quite helpful, because if you're used to having really irregular cycles, if you knew that you'd ovulated, it might give you an idea of like when you were going to get a period. Just an idea. So we don't know exactly what causes it, but it's characterized by insulin resistance, high cortisol, and high androgens. So androgens are like a form of male hormones. So that lends itself to a lot of people getting male pattern hair as part of PCOS. The high androgens also lends itself to the acne that can come with PCOS. And then high cortisol ends up being related to how stressed you are, how much cortisol you produce. And it has a knock-on effect in terms of your periods, because it takes away from your ability to produce progesterone, and progesterone is the hormone that you need in order to maintain an endometrial lining. So you're likely to have a relatively short period, or not very heavy period, if you have progesterone still occurring. A hormone test has shown I have very low cortisol. Could that also be an issue? And then it is the other extreme. Yeah, so when you are suffering with like chronic fatigue, you actually end up having not enough cortisol. And so you're right, yeah, it could be the other extreme, which is relating to this. So this is why in brackets here it says HPA axis dysregulation, like your body doesn't know how and when to produce its stress hormones anymore. And then insulin resistance is usually an issue, and that is usually being caused by diet, not type 1 chronic fatigue. Is you okay? Cool. Yeah, that's usually being caused by diet, and therefore is relievable. Like the insulin resistance bit should be like totally relievable, and the fact that that's not being told to you at the GP office is, I know, a travesty. But you might, if you've got a really tuned up GP, be offered metformin, which is a treatment for insulin resistance. But insulin resistance can be managed by diet. So there you go. So the kind of things that we do as herbalists working with people with PCOS is this. We'll try and help you balance your blood sugar, reduce your cortisol, reduce your androgens. We support the liver so that the high levels of androgens can be processed faster. We try to reduce your anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and we try to improve your immunity, because often insulin resistance lends itself to like high levels of colds and flus and things. So how do we balance the blood sugar? So I recommend working with dandelion root and cinnamon. Dandelion root and cinnamon do exactly this. They help to even out the blood sugar levels throughout the day. You don't need to have much. I think that even just 1 cup of tea or 1 teaspoon of cinnamon would be enough. So if you're adding cinnamon to your porridge in the morning or your smoothie in the morning, that's brilliant. Doesn't need to be any kind of special cinnamon. Cinnamon from the shops is just fine. Obviously, when it comes to balancing blood sugar, I would say that it's crucial for a person with PCOS to be eating a low GI diet if they're not already. So that's when you become aware of the glycemic index of any food. Glycemic load is even better. And try and avoid high GI things. You can get recipe books that are all about eating low GI diets. But more often than not, I find that my PCOS patients are already super clued up about their diets, and they end up being left with this question of like, why me? Also, I often have had problems in the past where patients have told me that they keep being told by their GP that they need to lose weight, that the fact that they haven't lost weight is the reason why they're ill. And actually, I've found that the weight that they're carrying has nothing to do with their blood sugar, their insulin resistance, because it was all actually to do with stress. So if I find that my patient has a really good diet and still hasn't had improvements to their symptoms, then the next line of thought for me is how much stress are they under? And if you're experiencing long-term stress, then you want to work with adaptogens like ashwagandha or Siberian ginseng. Ashwagandha is more relaxing of the two. Siberian ginseng is an energy booster. But I would say this, if you're already fatigued, work with the ashwagandha over the Siberian ginseng. You might find the Siberian ginseng a little bit too stimulating and actually could create an anxious feeling. So as a byproduct of you being stressed and potentially having a relatively poor diet, your androgens come relatively high considering where they should be. And for this, you can work with spearmint, which is a lovely herb that you can, is like readily available. You should be able to get it. PCOS Herbs do a 3 mint tea, and I believe that one of them is spearmint, peppermint, spearmint, and another mint that I don't know. And then peony is much harder to get hold of. You probably have to work with a herbalist to get that. Then it's important that we support the liver. We can support the liver if someone is coming from a history of toxicity and maybe they drank a lot or smoked a lot. Then milk thistle is really important for them. It will help, or if they had to have lots of medications actually as well. It will help the liver to recover its, it will actually help it to repair faster than it would otherwise. Whereas dandelion root is better if somebody needs support with processing high levels of hormones, whether it's stress hormones or androgens, on a day-to-day basis. And you might find that you want to work with both. But my recommendation is that if you are having to have medication, avoid the dandelion root and favor the milk thistle, because the dandelion root might increase the rate at which you process your drug and therefore decrease its effectiveness over the course of the day. So then we have relaxant, skullcap, and passion flower. I love these herbs. Skullcap is especially good if you're thinking too much, and passion flower is better if you need help sleeping. It's important to work with relaxants because they help just take the edge off the stress that we experience on a day-to-day basis. It's important for like the here and now stress, whereas the adaptogens are more important for the long-term stress, those situations that we can't change, but we have to endure, like COVID, for instance. And last but not least, improve immunity. It's important that we help people with insulin resistance, especially, to improve their immunity. And echinacea is wonderful because it balances the immune system. It will upregulate if it needs to, or downregulate if it needs to. So you can take any of these herbs in the following ways. You can use infusions. I would recommend getting your herbs from Neal's Yard Remedies or Baldwin's. And I would recommend taking one of the two of each of these pages and taking them in equal quantities if you wanted to make a really thorough, almost prescription. So there's Dr. Neal's Yard Remedies and Baldwin's. An infusion is simply a tea. You would mix equal parts of whatever herbs you're working with and use a heat teaspoon, cover it with boiling water, let it infuse for 10 minutes before drinking it. And you would do that 3 times a day. If you're working with a lot of roots and barks and stuff, then a decoction will suit better. It is when you put herbs into cold water, bring them up to a boil, simmer them for 10 minutes, strain them and drink that. And that you would have 3 times a day. But the easiest probably is to blend a tincture, because tincture is an alcohol extract of herbs. And you just take, you'll probably actually want to take 5 mils 3 times a day for something like PCOS. And I have to say that it is a stubborn condition. So I found that the bare minimum treatment time is 3 months. Like, I actually only just start to see an improvement after 3 months usually, and I start to see life-changing changes at 6 months. That's when I start to think maybe we can edge off the herbs at this point. My aim always with any kind of treatment is that people are being helped to be able to look after their own health. They shouldn't have to have herbs the rest of their life. There's very rare occasions where someone has to have herbs every day for the rest of their life. The last thing that you should consider is powders. You can have powdered herbs and add them to milk and create like lattes, which is what I've done with the Rested Resilience powder. That's ashwagandha. So this is a good product if you are thinking about long-term stress and fatigue. Other than that, in my range currently, I wouldn't say there's much for PCOS. I am working on something that would be blood sugar balancing, but that's not what I have right now. What I do have though is the premenstrual piece will help with stress, the here and now stresses of today. So if you think that stress is related to your PCOS, then that's as useful, and Rested Resilience probably even better. So I want to say that I'm starting a menstrual wellness collective in January. This is going to be a group of 9 people. It's going to be a group of yourself and 9 other people, and we're going to be doing monthly group calls where I'm going to be able to give you individualized herb advice, but much cheaper than when you work one-to-one with one of our herbalists. So if you're finding that you need that additional individualized attention, but you can't afford our treatment plans, then this is a great midpoint. It's also available to people outside of the UK, which is also a problem for us right now. We can't treat one-to-one with patients who are outside of the UK. So this is a good opportunity to do that. I'll be taking you through all the same like lessons that I would take my patients through, and giving very high quality advice, and you'll have the ability to talk with the other women in the group whenever you want via a private Facebook group. And we're going to have guest speakers each month, depending on what your needs are. So I don't know, I can't predict what those speakers will be, because they're going to be very much tailored to the requirements of the group. I'm expecting people with endometriosis, PCOS, maybe some people struggling to conceive on it. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Belinda, you're saying 5 mils of each herb. Let me explain myself. So I was saying, if you wanted to make a really comprehensive blend, then you could choose one herb off each of the slides. So I think you'd end up with a 5 or 6 herb blend, and you would mix equal quantities of them and then have 5 meals of that blend 3 times a day. So I want to come back to CMAC. I agree. It doesn't sound like you have PCOS unless you're having other symptoms like irregularity, perhaps male pattern hair, perhaps. In fact, I can read you out, like there's a list of symptoms in there. So 90% of people with PCOS have irregular cycles. 80% of them don't ovulate at all. 50 to 70% of them are insulin resistant. 60% of them have excess body hair. 50% don't have periods. 40% are overweight. 30% have abnormal bleeds. And 15% don't see a change in their basal body temperature because they're not ovulating. So if you're not ticking those boxes either, I would say it sounds like you have polycystic ovaries, and it may not even be a sign of illness. Oh, cool. All right. So you'll see if they're still there or not. Yeah, I would argue if you have polycystic ovaries and they're not like massively oversized growths and they're not causing you any other problems, then it's probably non-consequential. Oh, okay. So if you're wondering if you're actually ovulating, then you can take ovulation tests. Like every day, you can pee on a stick to find out if you get an FSH surge. No, FSH surge? Yeah, FSH and LH will surge, but I'm not sure which one it is they test on those pee sticks. LH, and you can take your body basal body temperature every morning. If you find that your basal body temperature changes at some point by over 0.2 degrees of a centigrade and stays above that, then you've ovulated. And you can learn about the fertility awareness method and how to do it on my Periods 101 course. Or you can get books about fertility awareness method and learn how to chart using the books. That's how I did it. Well, that, and I also had a mentor. And I can recommend a mentor. I actually know somebody who teaches women fertility awareness method and specializes in helping fertility issues in PCOS. But she works more with like supplements and sometimes drugs. Because I think she's actually, is she a GP? I can't remember. Belinda. Are the GP blood tests for insulin resistance sensitive enough? I'm going for a HB1 and A1C test tomorrow, but I've heard they're not necessarily that great for detecting insulin resistance. I'm not sure, to be honest. What I found, because I had a patient who was pregnant and diagnosed with gestational diabetes, she was testing her bloods for her insulin levels before and after every single meal, and it was fascinating. But so I'm not really sure if they're sensitive enough. Sorry, I'm not that familiar with that test. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's hard to know where to get your information on that kind of stuff now. Very hard. Can I still get an LH surge and not ovulate? I asked because when I did my progesterone test, my results weren't clear if I did ovulate or not. So I'm mega confused. Testing again next month. So you had a blood test that just told you about your progesterone levels. Is that right? Okay, yeah, so in your second half of your cycle. And it wasn't clear if you'd ovulated. Yeah. Okay, so just you might be lower than average, but it's not necessarily meaning that you didn't ovulate, basically. I don't think you can get an LH surgeon and not ovulate. I don't think so. I've heard criticism for the P-stick tests, for the LH P-stick tests. I don't think that they can give you negative positives. It's more that people have found them in the past to be difficult to interpret because they rely on a line getting darker, and I've seen people misinterpret them quite a lot. I really feel like taking your body temperature is much more clear than blood tests, which sounds like bizarre, but yeah, if you do the fertility awareness method, then you chart your cervical mucus alongside your basal body temperature. If your basal body temperature changes, it's just an absolute surefire fact that you ovulated, especially if it corresponds with a change in cervical mucus to being more like egg white, then yeah, you've nailed it. You've ovulated. This is the problem with blood tests, right? Is if you only take like one hormone and look at it on its own, it can be very difficult to interpret. The blood tests that I do with patients aren't blood tests, they're saliva tests, and they will check. You take a saliva sample every morning for like 28 days, I think, and then you send it off in the post, frozen, and the labs tell you a comprehensive hormone profile of what was happening with your hormones every day for 28 days, which I think is so much better than just looking at progesterone for a day in the second half of in what you think was your second half of your cycle when you have PCOS. You want to know, like, I don't want to know just your progesterone. I want to know your estrogen. I want to know your LH, your FSH. I want to know your cortisol. I want to know how your thyroid is functioning. You have to look so much further than just the reproductive hormones to really understand someone's health, especially in something like PCOS. The name makes you just concentrate on the ovaries. It's not about the ovaries, it's about the endocrine glands as a whole and how they connect to each other. It's about your insulin resistance levels and your stress levels, aka diet and lifestyle. It's always diet and lifestyle. Ooh, that sounds cool. I love Dutch things generally. Feel like they just do that whole like bunch of countries just do everything right. I mean, I've just assumed that you mean like it was based in Denmark. Denmark? I'm literally terrible. I'm assuming it's not an acronym for something else. But maybe it is. I was like, everything over there is so much better. Go on, then what does it stand for? I can't remember what the Jennifer one is called. Let's see, maybe it's called Jennifer. I'll bring you up the one that we used to do that I liked. Oh wow, that's so cool. Let's see. was called like, I think this is it. Requirements: 8 mils of serum. No, that's not that. See if I can find it for you guys. Can't remember what it was called. It was so good. No, sorry guys, I can't remember. But it was with Jennifer Diagnostics. But yeah, give us a link. That sounds really fascinating. You need stuff that's like accessible, you know, that you can actually do without having to go on a long journey or something. Requirement: 16 saliva samples. Yeah, this sounds like it. Yeah, here we go. So this is the one that I looked at, but the Dutch test one is potentially sounding more varied, actually. So the one that we used to do would check melatonin, progesterone, testosterone, estradiol, DHEA, and cortisol. So it was nice for like figuring out things like PMS, if you're ovulating, if you're infertile, why you might not be having periods. And it looked at things like endometriosis and polycystic ovarian disease, stuff like that. Cool. I'll have a look at the Dutch test. Sounds good. Yeah, they're expensive. The Geneva tests are expensive too. I really think that you can tell so much from a thorough diary of what someone's menstruation was like and what their fertility awareness chart is like. You can tell so much. And it doesn't cost anything. Well, it just costs like seeing someone who knows how to interpret the charts, I suppose, but you can just buy a book and teach yourself that sort of. Maybe I'm like underestimating my training by saying that. So if you guys don't have any more questions, then I will wrap it up. I've decided that rather than spam everybody with a email every day with the recording from the last night, I'm going to just send all the recordings from the week on Saturday in one email. I just think that'd be nice, rather than just blocking up people's email accounts. Well, good. I'm glad that you've enjoyed it. So thanks very much for joining. Tomorrow we're talking about heavy periods, probably not going to cross over with what you guys are experiencing. And then on Friday we're talking about light periods, which could be of interest. I should have everybody's email addresses, because if you got the link for this, then you have signed up for my emails, and therefore when I send a group one, they'll be there. Yeah, I was thinking like, if you're having light periods, yeah, CMAC, that'll be good. All right. Have a nice night, everybody. Bye.